invite our guest speaker, Professor Divay Gupta, who's a leading conservation architect and who heads the Architectural Heritage Division of INTAC. And he's participated in a number of projects across the world and is an awarded conservationist for his projects in Ladakh, and also an expert on the International Conservation Committee for the World Heritage Site Preah Vihear in Cambodia. He's a member of the National Culture Fund and Advisory Committee to the Government of India on World Heritage Matters, visiting faculty, and member on the Board of Studies of Department of Architecture Conservation at SPA New Delhi. We are very fortunate to have him here today to speak on the topic Sacred Landscape for Shiva Bhakti at Koh Ker, the ancient Lingapura of Cambodia. Sir.
Thank you, Deepa ji. And I hope I'm audible and visible. Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So many thanks to Indica and especially Professor Ranaji to point me towards this direction. And I'm really humble in this August gathering of real Shiva experts. And I'll just try to add a fraction of a drop in this ocean on Shivaism. Like you already said, that my topic is going to be making you aware of a sacred landscape that was created not in India, but in Cambodia as early as early 10th century, which was called the Lingapura. And as we perhaps all know, that there was great trade links between Southeast Asia, even Central Asia, between India, through both land, sea, and matrimonial alliances. And that's how the story begins, where a lot of our Indian philosophies, traditions, shastras, including our gods, starts to move from our original land in India to these places. And even when these two sculptures are almost separated by about 1,000 years, you can see the similarities of the iconography, one of Buddha of the Kushana period, the Gandhara period, and another one of Ram from Koh Ker. So it was not only the main gods like the Devi or the Shiva or the Vishnu that went, but even the lesser known gods like the Harihara and the horse-headed Heragalvira were also popular in Cambodia, even from 5th to 6th century onwards. And when they're gods, of course, you need their temples and houses. And these were also very much influenced by the kind of temples that were created in India, mainly because they were both created using the Shilp Shastra and the Vastu Shastras that were developed here. This is a temple called Ashram Maharishi, which is basically the ashram of Maharishi. It's the first temple that was created in Cambodia between the 5th, 6th century. And the plan, as you can see, are very similar to the early temples in India, both in the Gupta and the South India. This is the Lakshmana temple of Sirpur in Chhattisgarh. And you can see there were, from the material used and the decoration, the temples in Sambhor or the temple at Bayang in Takyo from 5th century also look very similar in their decoration architecture. And it was mainly because of the use of Sanskrit that traveled. In fact, Sanskrit became the official language of Cambodia from almost 7th century, and most of the inscriptions started to emerge in Sanskrit. And this also led to the excess of several Puranas and Shastras going there. And even in the first city of Mahendraparbat in the 9th century Cambodia, or later cities of Angkor, the more well-known cities of Angkor, clearly shows the influence of Vastu Purush and the 9 squares that were used in their planning. The arrival of Shiva in Cambodia is considered anywhere between 3rd to the 5th century, as some of these artifacts show the crystal linga on the bronze yoni from the 8th century of the Shiva. This Shiva head from 6th, 7th century. And huge edifices at scale that perhaps even competed with what was existing in India, like this temple dedicated to Shikareshwara, modeled to make the Kailash in Cambodia itself in Trebihir, is a kilometer-long temple on top of the highest mountain in the Khmer region, or the entire riverbeds of Mount Kulen that were carved of millions of Shivalingas, calling it the river of Lingas in the 11th century, where the water once flew over it was sanctified, and once it went into the plains of Angkor, it was considered as the water of Ganga because it flew over Shiva. And one of these sites that I will be talking a little bit more in detail about, or would like to talk in more in detail about, is Koh Ker or the Lingapura in Cambodia, which was created by a genius king called Jayavarmana in 921. And this rebel king who sort of left Angkor because some dispute, created his own capital using the Devaraja card in a very, very interesting and unique way, where from God king, he created Shiva as the king, which of course had certain parallels in Pallava and the Jagannath temple in India also, and declared himself as the Shiva Ansha or the Shiva Padabhuli, as the sand under the grains of the Shiva's feet, and declared himself as the deputy of Shiva, and created this Lingapura, the abode of Shiva. This particular site spread over close to about 45 square kilometer long, created the largest pyramidical temple ever dedicated to Shiva. And this particular pyramid, called the Prasad Crown, was modeled on Kailash. Also, this is just a reconstructed view that I have borrowed from the École Française d'Orient, where it shows that how this particular group of temple, which itself is also close to about 1 kilometer long by half a kilometer wide, which is called the Prasad Tomb complex now, look like. And if you look at it in the wider context, it had large water bodies and had unique orientations and linkages with several of its other associated temples, including sort of a Nandi pavilion close to about 1.5 kilometers across the temple, and many other Shiva Linga temples. These 4 temples also had huge Shiva Lingas. This temple also had a very unique orientation and perfect geometrical alignment. If you look at its conception and planning, which also shows influence of both Vastu Purusha and the Chakra concept in the Indian temple planning, and the mathematical precision with which this particular temple was also created also added to the symbolism of it being abode of the Shiva, because that has to be perfect without any imperfections. A very unique aspect of this particular temple is its unique orientation. It's actually oriented not to the cardinal east-west that the other Cambodian temples are generally oriented. It is oriented about 13.7 northeast, about 14 degrees northeast. And this, I feel, is mainly to align it with certain celestial occurrences in this case, it aligns almost perfectly to the rising sun of the new year, and it almost makes it like the calendar with the other associated temples, also aligning it to either the summer or the winter solstice. And not only the sun rises, but it also aligns itself to certain moon rises and even moon settings. And most of the features of the buildings, of other buildings, including the water bodies, are determined by this particular orientation. As you may, perhaps I do not know, it was very surprising for me to know that even the Kashi Vishwanath temple in Varanasi also aligns almost exactly to that particular degree. Uh, and so does the Swaminalai temple of Kumbakonam at Panchakrosha, and so the several other temples in Kanchi and Naganatha temple also in Kumbakonam. To this degree also has certain influences from the Vastu Purusha. As you know that there is a particular method of calculating the real east, which is mainly the Ishan, and not only the cardinal east that is important in the Vastu Purusha. Not only that, with this particular alignment, the Jayavardhana also tried to orient this particular temple towards the other existing Shiva temple in the region, even beyond the boundaries of then Khmer Empire, like the Wat Phu temple of the Shiva in Laos, or the Previhi, the Bandrik mountains, or the Mount Kulen, and earlier Hindu capitals of Ishanpura, or today known as Samruddhepur. A very interesting aspect of this particular planning in this is the Trinity, an equilateral triangle that forms between the three important temples, the most important temples on the site. One dedicated to Shiva that I just showed you on Prasad form, the temple dedicated to Vishnu, Prasad Chen, and to Brahma, which is Prasad Bampetirchon. And each of them had very unique iconography to itself. And this was also, again, a concept of creating the heaven on earth where all the gods, all the important gods of Hinduism were present within his capital. And these were not the only temples. He created close to about 180 temples dedicated to various gods. Most of them, almost 100 of them, to Shiva, with huge Shiva lingas, as you can see in one of the Shiva terraces temple, as it is called. Of course, today the glory of the site has been taken away from the forest because it lied abandoned for close to about 700 years till its rediscovery. And slowly the government of Cambodia, through the NAPV, the national authority, is trying to restore it. Besides the main pyramidical temple of Shiva, the main symbolism of the site is determined by the main temple as Kailash, Jayavarman as the Shiva deputy, and the geometric perfection in the sacred landscape that I just mentioned. They also created a Ganga there by siting a temple, a roofless temple actually, on the highest point, and the water, once it flowed from that, flowed into the various water tanks. And in that temple, they were evoking Ganga, that whatever water falls on it may please be sanctified. And it is that water that flowed into the main temple, and from the main temple back into the river. So this particular aspect of sanctification of water is perhaps very, very unique, and this almost became a trend post Koh Ker in the 11th century. I had already shown you the example of Mount Kulen, and it can also be called as Gangaization, where even their main river, Kalmi Kong, is also called Ma Ganga. And all through wherever this water flowed, they carved these icons of Hindu gods so that wherever the water touched, the rocks of the water is continued to be sanctified till it reaches the main temple. And the most interesting aspect is the use of Shiva Shakti mandala in the entire planning of the Padmaka uh, shape that is mentioned in the Vastu Purusha. And though there are few examples, even in India, at this scale or at this perfection, I have never seen the use of this symbolic concept in planning for any place dedicated to Shiva. And like I said, there are some examples. Even Professor Rana had shown about Vidyanchal, but there are at Bhaktapur and Kumbakonam and Chitrakoot and Braj also is also 12 petaled flower based, symbolically based on that. It was not only at the grand scale, even the minutest of detail were to create this legitimacy of the Jayavarmana as a king, the two cousins fighting, the, the war between the good and the evil being won by the good. I have not seen any such depiction. This is a reconstruction view, but such Puranic Puranic iconographies I have not even seen anywhere in India, where you can see Vishnu and the four Pandavas and even Balarama sitting and Duryodhan and Bhima fighting. And Jayavarmana himself elevates himself as one of the demigods uh, with his presence in the court of Yama with Chitragupta and other associated gods in the court of Yama sitting. Not only that, I think at the almost at the verge of blasphemy of that time, he even modeled some sculptures like this one is Shiva Skanda of himself and his son Harshavardhana too. And this, mind you, is happening in 921. There are few examples in India, but again, not of this scale. This was the largest dancing Shiva that was created, now in huge fragments, again being restored. The sculpture itself is close to about 7 meters high, with another 3 meters high platform. And it also has Kali and Skanda and Parvati as smaller sculptures. And this perhaps the largest sculptures created in 921 in monolithic stone. Even when you compare it to a later temple of Brideshwara created by Raja Chola, it still surpasses its scale or its height. And there are several similarities even when the two sites are almost 80 to 90 years apart, Koh Ker being earlier, the five-headed Shiva or the Raja Varna being crowned by Shiva himself to legitimize his rule. And again, the state of the Shiva temples started to emerge on the Indian landscape. The Matangeshwara in Khajuraho, the Bhoja, Temple Kaleju, Lingaraja in India could, I presume, could also be in a way trying to reclaim the status of center of Shivaism, which Jayavarmana gave a stiff competition. And this is, I think, where we can learn because the site had remained in a frozen state within those 23 years that it remained. And there's much to learn, perhaps, from us also, because many of these sites have also drastically changed in these 1,000 years. But it still remains the largest Shiva temple in the world, the largest pyramidical temple. But very few people know it outside Cambodia, and I doubt how many people even know it in India. But that has not surpassed its glory, significance, and uniqueness. Even Cambodia, the country which is now almost 90% Buddhist, His Royal Excellency, the Royal King of Cambodia, uh, prays at the pyramidical temple occasionally, and several Hindu or Indian tourists still bathes or carries a bottle of milk and pours over these Shiva lingas, making it continued tradition even today. And unlike whatever we want to believe in terms of Shiva being an import to Cambodia, Shiva is very much present, and he has traveled and left his footprints on the mountains and stone pieces in Cambodia. So he's a god that is still very much alive and wanders in the forests and mountains of Cambodia, like these particular Shiva Padas from the 7th century shows. Thank you a lot again for this opportunity. And if there's any opportunity to answer any question, I'll be happy to do so. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir. That was such a poetic conclusion, a befitting conclusion to such a fascinating study.